Awesome. So, hi everyone, and thank you again for joining us today. Today we have, let's see, national trainer Anna Rayner, and she is the founder of Creative Play LA. And today, what she's going to be presenting on is how we can help children manage their stress through art. I know oftentimes when I'm feeling really stressed out, drawing or even doing those adult coloring books really helps me. So I'm super excited to hear about what she's going to be presenting on today. Again, this is going to be recorded so you can all watch it afterwards. And if you have any questions, feel free to put stuff in the chat. I'll be monitoring that throughout the webinar. And again, thank you for joining us today. So now I'll go ahead and pass it over to Anna.
Thank you, Lindsay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you good.
Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. It's a privilege to be here with Region 9, and thank you for taking a break in your day to learn a little bit more and share some thoughts and ideas about art as a way to build resilience and a way to calm children down, to help them channel some of their confusing and conflicting emotions, which have been coming down very heavily because of the pandemic and all the stress that that has created. So I know all of us that work in childcare are looking for solutions, positive solutions to the challenging behaviors we see today in our classrooms. And, I don't have to tell you because you see it and you feel it. And children are just, you might say, their nervous systems are a chaotic mess, just as many of ours are. We're working hard as adults to regulate ourselves now that the pandemic is, past its peak. But, it's not even over. So the world is full of fear and caution and real threats at the biological level. So we all have had to work extra hard, doing these mindful exercises, whether it's art or movement, doing more gardening, more breathing, more of the active ways that we engage with our senses to get out of our heads and into our bodies. Because we know that all the research that we find on neuroscience tells us that stress is held in our bodies. It's not in our cerebral cortex, it's not in the executive functioning, our frontal cortex. It's in the limbic system, it's in our brainstem, and it's living really throughout the cells in our neurosystem. And so art, because it is a physical activity, and the more physical, the better, during this time of creating calm, art is a really great way to channel a lot of that energy and help children feel more in control of their lives. So I'm going to toggle through. I've got some videos to show you and a lot of pictures that were taken, literally live from classroom experiences, classroom visits that I have made. So hopefully there'll be pictures that you relate to and you think, oh yeah, I've seen that, or I might try that. So that's my hope for you, to find some ideas that you can use right away, like tomorrow. Lindsay said it's Wednesday. Well, if you're in the classroom yourself, you've got Thursday and Friday still, and maybe this afternoon. So some of these ideas are going to be things literally you can use right away with materials that I'm sure you already have. So here's a picture of me. A couple of years ago, we were right in the middle of the pandemic, and I went down to San Diego to do a training. Actually, it was on site in the classroom. And normally I don't really work with children. I work with teachers as a teacher trainer. But this was a lab school at Mesa Community College, and the director said, I'd like you to come and work with the teachers. It considered a teacher training, but I want you to model how to work with the children. And I had never been asked to do that before, but we all like doing things that are different, just for a change up of our routines. So I said yes, and I learned so much. And it was a bit of a humbling experience because I hadn't been working in the classroom for a few years, but I had all day, and it was so interesting what I learned from the kids themselves. So I'm going to show you a video clip. Let me see. I'm going to reduce this a little bit to show you the clip, and you'll see it's just a couple of minutes of expressive art in action, getting out stress. As hard as you can. I like it. Whoa. That's the way to do it. Yes, go for it. As hard as you can.
I see a rainbow, I see some fire. Oh my gosh, I'm seeing a lot of things, you guys. You got the fire. Careful, follow you don't want the paper, okay?
So let's take a look at that just for a moment and see the setup there. You know, that has the ratio of teacher or teacher assistant to children is very small. So that's a kind of a luxurious situation because it is a lab school. And you don't always have, you know, the luxury of attending to such a small group of children. But this table was set up, it could be set up permanently with crayons for scribbling, just by having this butcher paper taped down. And that's what I really recommend, just having things that children can self-select and work independently. And we did apply paint as another layer on top of these crayon scribbles. So it was kind of a type of crayon resist, you could call it, which is just putting a water-based paint on top of crayons. So we layered different things, and then you could later layer glue and collage and build up something that actually ends up looking like a nice mural piece that you can hang on the wall. But it's basically just an expression of, it's a kinesthetic expression. It's just large whole body scribbling. And I almost never see this in a classroom. So when we did this with the kids and they responded, this little group of 3 children responded again and again. They did it pretty much all day. A lot of the other kids did it for 1 or 2 sessions, and then they moved to another area. But these are the kinds of things that I recommend you be doing and especially for if you have a program or if you're a teacher who's doing what I call the old school way of doing product art, which you would think wasn't done that much anymore, but actually is. A lot of classrooms are still doing a lot of product decorative art. You know, it's spring, and so they're making frogs and butterflies and tulips out of paper plates and having things that follow a specific instruction that's not at all expressive. It doesn't go below the neck. It's not a body experience. It's purely a following directions experience. And, you know, even though you might think you would know better than to do that because your child development experience teaches you, you learn that in school, that process is where kids learn. And yet process art is a little trickier to basically to set up a classroom where you're doing open-ended loose play or process art. It takes a more experienced teacher or a more motivated teacher or a more aware teacher. You need to be aware that this is where the calm is taking place. This is where the brain is developing too. So it's not just about getting through stress, but it's actually learning and developing your brain power. So all the good stuff is happening at these kinds of things as opposed to cutting out paper plates or gluing on wiggly eyes. So pardon me if I'm kind of preaching to the choir, because some of you might already know this, it might be very clear. But my experience has shown me that many teachers, in fact, probably more than half the teachers I've ever seen, half the classrooms, are doing much more product art than process. But especially in this day and age with COVID and the pandemic and all the stress that kids are under, I would eliminate as much product art as you can and make it as much process art as you can. So let's see if I can get this a little bigger again. Oopsie. And we'll continue with our thinking. So, is it true that something as simple as art can actually wire the brain? Well, it really is true, and all the neuroscience that you read about it supports that idea. And yet, it is an idea that's not very well known by parents. You know, parents a lot of times are waiting for some cute little frog or some little spring butterfly to come home because they're delighted that it shows them what their child has been doing in school. So say in this case where this is a 3-year-old who's doing observational painting from some little gourds, you could put any kind of flower or things from a nature walk or really anything. You can even stack shoes. It doesn't matter what you put in there. It's observational drawing or painting. But a child of 3 is not going to make it look like representational art. And so the parent is not going to celebrate that. A lot of times they'll just think it's something that kind of goes into the trash until the real art comes along, like until that starts looking like what it's supposed to look like, which doesn't happen until, 5, 6, really. The children developmentally are able to copy something very graphically on paper. Some of them can do it at 4, but mostly they're using their imagination, they're experimenting, they're playing with color, and they are trying to connect some of the elements that they see in front of them and put them on paper, which is enormously good for brain development. But again, the parents haven't had the explanation of this. The parent is instead giving the child a coloring book and oftentimes thinking that that is art, because art has been so misunderstood for so long. What art is, I think of it as like many things in life. 20 or 30 years ago, it's like we were almost in the dark ages about things like women's rights, or climate change, or what inclusion and diversity means. It's amazing how much in the last 10 years or 15 years the world has come along, that our culture has become much more aware of so many things, and art is one of those things as well. So many people don't understand art, have never been exposed to what art is, so they think art is maybe a coloring book, art is maybe going to the museum and seeing what the gifted artists do, or art is maybe a class. Maybe you'll take a Saturday class in painting or drawing or clay. It's such a compartmentalized sort of silo experience in so many adults' minds. But in a children's mind, it's not at all, because in a child's mind, it's like, wow, give me some color. Let me make a mess. Let me be in control. Let me do my thing. And so when a teacher gives a child, a certain structure, like this is how you're going to do the butterfly or the tulip or the frog. This is how you do the pig. That's, the child is not putting any of themselves into that. It's really just following the teacher's ideas, following her directions. Whereas this loose, open-ended stuff, this is like a very young child, less than 2, but has the ability to grasp and work with 2 hands at one time, which is great for crossing the midline and brain development. If you've ever known or studied anything about what pediatric occupational therapists do, they're doing a lot of things that are crossing the midline, sensory integration. A lot of times when children are developmentally delayed, or there's some suspicion that maybe there's something that needs an assessment, something feels a little off, so you might send that child to a pediatric occupational therapist for an assessment. And they're doing a lot of things that are involving the same kind of physical activities that happen with open-ended art. And a lot of those same kinds of activities that a play therapist or a child psychologist or let's say a pediatric OT might do, kids are doing on their own automatically by doing this open-ended kind of art. So I love this. This came from Children's Hospital here in LA. I got this picture years ago because I was doing a site visit, and I just loved this group easel set up, and I was like, wow, why didn't I think of that? That's the fun thing in education, that we can share ideas and spread those good ideas around to other people. And so you find those things that you think, wow, why didn't I think of that? You think, well, but now I'm going to implement it, because this is just boxes that have been, taped with duct tape down onto one of those tables that we all have. And it's that collaborative experience. So on the bottom of the slide here, it says, when we know these things, it's sort of intellectually, we know in our heads that this is where the good stuff is happening. And children are automatically feeling safe, and the teacher can be calm because the kids are engaged. When you bring out the open-ended art, oftentimes, you will feel the energy level decrease because kids are actively doing something that they're in charge of. So you almost feel like a breathing space. So why, when we know this as teachers, why do so many people still do the cookie cutter crafts, the product art? And, that's some of it's, I think, in my opinion, what I addressed earlier, it's kind of what we used to do. When I taught years, when I was teaching in my early 20s, oftentimes it was, let's find a fun project that relates to spring or this holiday that's coming up. Let's find a fun project for Mother's Day. I was always thinking about a project that you would find in a magazine somewhere. and you would cut up a bunch of the parts, components, and then you would have them glue it together, and maybe they'd decorate it a little bit differently so they all looked different, but kind of they were structurally all the same. And you know, you can do structural things as long as most of it is done by the child and still have it be processed. Because I think a lot of crafts can be very open-ended. They just have to not be all going in the same direction. The instructions have to be very loose. So if we look at these two examples of butterfly art, you can kind of see visually what it is that I'm talking about here. So a very open-ended art butterfly on the top, a very structured one on the bottom. So the one on the top was done by observing, they weren't actual butterflies, it was a book with realistic photographs of butterflies, because we don't always have the luxury of having a butterfly or a bird or whatever we might want to do a springtime picture of in front of us. But we can get pictures, you know, actual photographs. And anyway, they studied them with their, you know, little magnifiers, and they, you know, got black marker to do the drawing, and then did liquid watercolor or cake pan watercolor on top. And it's lovely, and that's, I think, done by a 5-year-old, 4 or 5. And that's what looks pretty representational. That's why I know it's probably a 5-year-old. But it doesn't matter that it looks representational, because it's their representation, of course. It's what they're seeing. They're working towards it. They're practicing. Their brain is at work trying to see, what is it that what do I observe? You know, what about that symmetry? That's an amazing thing, that each side of the butterfly looks like the same shape and the same color. So here on the bottom, you can tell, you know, without me explaining to you, that pretty much everything was done by the teacher here. And yet, these are the kinds of things that parents will celebrate. And so what you have to do really is begin to educate your parents that, yeah, those are the kind of projects that the babysitter can do, or camp, or just any kind of, you know, that we are child development people, and you send your child to school here because we're people who have studied child development. We know children. The babysitter maybe doesn't have the experience and education we do. So let the babysitter do these little structured projects. Here's a way to test yourself, you know, A, B, C, D, which is the least structured, which is the most structured, and can you spot the two that are more process oriented? So let's see, I'm going to ask Lindsay if anybody will be vocal about it and just put in the chat. I think the question at the top says, can you spot the two? But what would you say is the one most process oriented of these? Any takers? Okay, well, for the sake of time, I'm gonna give you the answer. The answer is B, and then the second one is A, and I would say the most structured is D. And why would you?
We have a lot of we have 2 C's and 2 D's in the chat.
Okay, all right, excellent, excellent. Well, I'm going to give the B's my biggest shout out, because that was my intended answer, B, which is pretty much the same. Oopsie, the same as this one. It's just black line art with watercolor on top, or there they're just starting to put some color in. And then C, you know, I would, if we had more time, I would want to have a dialogue with you about the 2 people that picked C, because here's what my opinion on C is. C is kind of in the middle of structured. It's not as structured as D, but when I look at that, I think probably the only thing the children did was lay the tissue paper on top. That's probably tissue paper and glue. The popsicle stick, you know, if you gave that to 3 or 4-year-olds, especially now when so many children, because of the pandemic, have lost a lot of their developmental skills, or they never developed them because they've been on lockdown. They haven't been out playing in the world. So a lot of children are developmentally delayed just because of the pandemic. And so, you know, this could be, this would take a lot of cognitive development, a lot of executive functioning to place that craft stick so central in the middle and glue it down. So I would venture to say, if you were to give this to a classroom of 4-year-olds, most of them would not put that so vertically in there. So what that tells me is, maybe the teacher did that part. I don't know. I would hate to think it, but maybe the teacher really, the night before, cut out all those things. Maybe she had a Cricut machine and cut them all out, die cut them, or maybe she hand cut them. I certainly used to do a lot of prep the night before, as we all did. But that's probably not enough that the kids have done. They probably don't all look different enough. And D is, I'm glad nobody picked D, because when you look at D, and I think if you know art and you know crafts and you know materials and how they function, somebody has put, well, first the wiggly eyes are just symmetrical on there. But look at those pom-poms. They are on top of pipe cleaners, which are the little antenna. And so somebody has put pom-poms on top of the pipe cleaners. And I when I looked at that, I thought, how in the world did they get a pipe cleaner in to have a pom-pom on it? They must have had a hot glue gun. That's all I could think of. Because, glue will, one thing is round and the other thing is pointed. How is it going to adhere? So I thought, well, maybe the teacher hot glue gunned all the pom-poms on the night before. I don't know. But anyway, you don't want to waste your time doing that. There's too much important work to do. So maybe if you did that a while ago and the parents loved it, because parents will say, oh, that's so cute. And then maybe their second child, they have a second sibling, and it's like, are you going to make that butterfly again this season? Because I still saved the one that we made, my other child made. You hear this thing because the parents love that it's cute and charming. But again, let the babysitter do it, or let the parents do it. You can do that later, because there's a purpose in that. It's following directions, learning about materials, but it's not expression, and it's not a below the neck kind of sensory experience, which is really what art gives you that puzzles and other things don't give you. Art gives you a documented version of something that's inside you, like this. Like this. And this is a photograph that I've been showing. I got this photo from a child I was working with when I was about 30 years old. And I'm a lot older than that now. You can tell by my white hair. But the point being, I've had it for so long because it was the most beautiful expression of anger I had ever seen. It was the most direct. It was the most visceral. It really shows what that child could not say in words. And these are the kinds of things that children should be offered art. They should be offered a voice. And so many times when we give them structured crafts and the parents say, oh, that's so cute. Are you going to do the butterfly again this season? Because I saved my other child's butterfly. It's like, yeah, you know what? We're doing more expressive things because the kids have so many feelings built up inside. We're using art in a different way now to really help them express who they are. Not because we found a cute project that we thought you would like. Because the kids really need to show us who they are in a way that's unique to them. They can do art. Maybe they can't tell you how they're feeling. They're not developmentally capable of understanding how they're feeling. And so they need us to help them understand and give labels to big feelings. And we need to have them scribble and throw paint outside art where you can throw paint, and show us what's going on with them so we can see, make visible what they're experiencing and honor them as people for these experiences and normalize and say, we're all angry and frustrated because of the lockdown. Who ever thought we'd have to be living in this world? So, it's really, let me see if this one, I can get this one. No, I don't have the activation on that. This is one that's just so great for the calming effects of this was a class of 3-year-olds where they were painting apples and just the essence of apple. And this little boy was so involved in it. He was in the flow, as they say, that I was standing there, right there. You see me, I had my phone camera and I put it on video because he was so immersed in in the moment. He was so present, painting around and around and around, that he had no awareness that I was standing right there. He completely ignored me because I wasn't part of what he was interested in. So I was able to get a really great video of that where he was just doing what we as adults strive to do, which is like meditate or garden or cook, things where we want to stop our mind from our to-do lists and our tasks and our worries and our fears, our own preoccupations, to just be there, to be present. And that's what that boy was doing with something so simple as painting apples. So I'll show you these. These were taken recently. Round and round and round. I love it. How does it feel? ¿Cómo se siente? ¿Bien? Bien. I'm going to just... And, oopsie. Let me get this smaller again. Okay, I'm sorry. I was trying to just have you not listen. I was talking, and as I watched the video, I thought I shouldn't be talking, but I should have just been quiet. Round and round and round. So watch her not listen to me. Well, how does it feel? ¿Cómo se siente? ¿Bien? Bien. ¿Cómo te sientes? Dice. Bien. So look at her just enjoying that process. And here's one I want to show you. This is a little boy who is so completely out of control. He came up, this was a family, what would you call it? A family festival that was by a Head Start here in Los Angeles. And it's with Children's Institute, which is a large Head Start in LA. And I had done a number of trainings for them that season. And so I offered to do a family festival for them just as a thank you for the trainings. And they invited all the families to come in for a few hours in a local park. And I set up this sort of circle painting, and this little child came up in his parents were holding him, and he was like just a wiggle worm. He just could not sit still, and I could tell from the look on the parents' eyes that they were kind of exasperated from the energy this child had pent up. And so we were able to get him over here and watch him how he's really channeling that energy. That's the way to do it. So he just went on and on with the banging, and it was just so satisfying. The parents were like really like, oh, thank goodness, we found some place for him to put some of this energy. So that's what you want to be doing with your open-ended art, just moving energy. So look at the absorption. There's a lot of chatter going on in the background, but look, that child is just doing that. And these are Head Start kids, these are. So anyway, let's get on to, we've got 2:30, so we don't want to spend too much more time on this, because I know, Lindsay and I were talking about, people don't want to sit for too long in a webinar, especially in the middle of your day. But I do want to go over a couple of these slides for you. So how to solve any problem? The answer always lies at the root. We know that, just common sense, adulthood tells you that. And the challenging behaviors, or what you might call the behavior problem, we try to give it a positive spin and say, it's like, what happened to you, and how can I help? This is it's challenging you, it's challenging me, and so let's together, help you develop a way to, breathe and self-regulate. But really, it's a problem we want to find a solution for, and we have to look at the root to find it. So let me get this bigger hand. So product art, like this little turtle up here on the top, that's always working at the surface, and process art is always working at the root. And that's really what you want to do. You want to be able to just work at the root. So you have these kind of you do a lot of stuff on large butcher paper. You roll out the butcher paper, and you roll it up, and these are just dry materials, mark making materials. You can do that for a number of days before you add any paint on top. And before you bring the paint out, things can be much more independent, because kids can come and go, and you're not as worried about kids getting paint all over the place. You might be able to say, well, the paint only stays here at this table. But now, after the pandemic, kids cannot follow rules. Their executive functioning skills are not developed. Their ability to control their impulses. So sometimes just bringing out the paint at the very end is the way you have to help them learn to self-regulate. So I'm going to toggle through these things kind of quickly, because I want you to have time to ask any questions too. Lindsay's going to give an open invite, when I finish this up, just to have you ask any questions before we close here. But really, any art that a child does is a self-portrait of sorts. You don't have to be drawing a picture of these happen to be actual self-portraits, but they're always, if it's open-ended, they're putting some of who they are, how they feel, what colors they like, what their energy level is like. They're putting that out there. So these are these big outdoor things where I mentioned you can splash paint, splatter paint, outdoors. Spring is here. We're lucky in most of these Western states to have warm weather much of the year. So, we can do outside art a lot, and that they can really get your body into it. And what you're aiming for is this safety, connection, and calm. So those are my 3 words. Those are my little mantra that I came up with after researching trauma for 2.5 years. I've been researching it, trauma-informed care, specifically for early childhood, because there hasn't been a lot written. There's been a lot written for elementary school, middle school, and high school, but not a lot of research has been done for the early childhood, the 3 to 8, and certainly not even, infants and toddlers, because the research just hasn't been there. The focus is, we've got to say in our country, much more on elementary, primary school. Early childhood, the whole profession is, sort of coming up the ranks, but slowly, in terms of being as credible as the other education is. And yet we know this is the most important stage, because this is where all the brain development takes place. It's through those, 0 to 3, 0 to 5, those early years that children are learning who they are and how they fit into the world. Whether the world's a safe place, whether people like them, whether people care about them, whether they matter. And it is these early years that you can use art to answer those questions, so that children can see they can work together and express themselves and feel like they matter, and what they paint or do, what they draw, what they tell you in their artwork really matters. So that's my website. If you're interested in the kinds of ideas that I'm presenting, I have a whole section on free resources. I have 3 ebooks that are there. You can download them absolutely free, and you don't even have to give me your email. You can just download them right away. If you want to have my monthly newsletter, for that you do need to give me your email. But if you follow all the socials, I once in a while post on those too. So what I hope you'll consider is to buy my new book. You can take a cell phone grab of that, and that'll take you to the Amazon site. It's not self-published, it's by a real publisher. And I have worked on it for 2.5 years, and it's 200 pages, and it has over 100 illustrations. So it's what I call a graphic textbook. You can open it up at any time, and it's like lots of drawings in it. So it'll make it easy for you to apply. So I'm gonna stop the share and take any questions that you might have. You can address them to Lindsay. Or actually, now I can see the chat now that I'm off of my screen. So we were reading product art. Oh, we were okay. Got it. Pre-cut squares from Amazon. Yeah, Alfina. Yes, exactly. Thank you. Exactly. When you can tear it, or you can practice with scissors, but torn tissue paper looks pretty cool. The QR code didn't work for you? Darn it. I just dragged that in. So, if you go onto Amazon and you put my name, which is probably up, you see by my little photo here, Anna Rayner. And it is called, and maybe Lindsay can do her magic and put it in there. I just know Lindsay's the age where she grew up with technology, so she knows
that should be the correct link. I went ahead and put the link in the chat for the book.
Okay, great. All right, so yeah, it's called Trauma-Informed Art Activities. That's kind of the keyword, Trauma-Informed Art Activities. and that will pull it up, and also my name will pull it up. So anyway, thank you for asking. I've worked so hard on this, and I wrote it for you. I wrote it for people who are working with kids, so I hope you will put it to use. Boots on the ground. So any other questions? Well, if not, thank you so much, and it's great to be a part of Region 9. You guys have great services and conferences and lots of support for people with boots on the ground. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the
Thank
rest of
you
your
so
day.
much. Thank you so much, Anna. And thank you again, everyone, for joining. This recording will be available on YouTube. And as always, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Thank you.
Bye now.